The morning mist clung to the valley like a shroud of forgotten memories. Marshal Tucker Dawson stood at his cabin window, watching the sun break through the mountains, just as he had every dawn for the past 15 years. His weathered hands gripped his coffee cup, steam rising between his fingers like whispers from the past. He never expected to see her again, but there she was, riding through the fog with the grace of thunder and the silence of snow. The woman approaching his homestead bore little resemblance to the terrified 8-year-old girl he had pulled from the burning wagon so many years ago, yet something in the way she held her shoulders, something in the fierce determination of her posture, told him exactly who she was. Ayanna Blackhorse had come home. The memory of fire. Tucker's mind drifted back to that terrible night in 1847. He had been a young cavalry officer then, fresh-faced and eager to prove himself on the frontier. His patrol had been riding through the Bitterroot Valley when they saw the orange glow against the night sky. By the time they reached the wagon train, the attack was nearly over. The Crow war party had struck swift and merciless. Families lay scattered like broken dolls among the burning wagons. Tucker had searched desperately through the smoke and chaos, looking for survivors. That's when he heard a small, frightened whimper coming from beneath an overturned wagon. The little girl was trapped, her dark hair singed, her dress torn and bloody. Her parents lay motionless nearby. Tucker had crawled through the flames, ignoring the heat that blistered his skin, and pulled her free. Her eyes, those deep, dark eyes, had looked up at him with a mixture of terror and gratitude that he would never forget. "Please," she had whispered in broken English, her small hand clutching his uniform. "Don't let them take me." Tucker had wrapped her in his coat and carried her to safety. But when they reached Fort Collins, the authorities had different plans. The girl was half Cheyenne, they discovered, daughter of a white trader and an Indian woman. In those days, such children often faced an uncertain fate. The military wanted to send her to a reservation. Tucker had fought the decision, but orders were orders. The last time he saw her, she was being loaded onto another wagon, this time bound for Cheyenne territory. She had looked back at him through the canvas opening, those same dark eyes now filled with a different kind of understanding. She was 10 years old, and she was learning that the world was not a kind place. The calm before. 15 years later, Tucker had retired from military life. The frontier had changed, and so had he. The Indian wars were winding down, treaties were being signed, and men like him were relics of a more violent time. He had built this cabin in the same valley where he had first found Ayanna, though he had never been sure why. Perhaps he had been waiting. The sound of hoofbeats grew closer. Tucker set down his coffee and stepped onto his porch. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. In the distance, he could see her more clearly now. She rode a magnificent paint horse, her long black hair flowing behind her like a war banner. She wore traditional Cheyenne dress, beautifully beaded buckskin that caught the early light, but she also carried herself with the bearing of someone who had seen battle. A lance was strapped to her back, and a tomahawk hung at her side. Tucker felt his heart begin to race, not from fear, but from a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. The frightened child he had saved had grown into something magnificent and terrible. She was no longer the helpless girl who needed rescuing. She was power incarnate. The Arava Ayanna brought her horse to a stop 20 feet from Tucker's porch. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the years and the distance. The morning was so quiet that Tucker could hear his own heartbeat. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the delicate way that frontier towns prized, but in the way that mountains were beautiful, fierce, untamed, and dangerous. Her face had the high cheekbones and strong jawline of her mother's people, but her eyes held intelligence and cunning that spoke of hard-won survival. "Marshal Dawson," she said finally. Her voice was deeper now, richer, with only the faintest trace of an accent. "You look older." Tucker managed a smile. "So do you, Little Sparrow." It had been his nickname for her during those few precious days when she had been under his protection. She had been so small, so fragile, like a bird with a broken wing. Now she looked like she could break him in half without effort. "That name belongs to a child who died in a wagon 15 years ago," Ayanna said, dismounting with fluid grace. "I am Ayanna Blackhorse, War Chief of the Northern Cheyenne." The words hit Tucker like a physical blow. War Chief. She had not just survived, she had risen to lead her people. The little girl he had saved from the flames had become a leader of warriors. "War Chief," he repeated slowly. "That's quite an accomplishment. For a woman, for a half-breed, for the frightened child you once knew." Her smile was sharp as winter wind. "Yes, Marshal, it is quite an accomplishment." The revelation. Tucker gestured toward his cabin. "Would you like some coffee? We have much to discuss." I think Ayanna nodded and followed him inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable, filled with the kind of furniture a man makes with his own hands when he has too much time to think. She sat across from him at his small wooden table, her presence somehow making the entire room feel smaller. "Why have you come?" Tucker asked as he poured her coffee. "After all these years, why now?" "Because there will be no more years," she said simply. "The war is ending, Marshall. My people are being driven onto reservations. The old way of life is dying." Tucker felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "And you?" "I have been given a choice." Her hands wrapped around the coffee cup, but she didn't drink. "Submit to the reservation, or fight until the last of my warriors falls. The army has offered terms. They want to negotiate. With you." "With me?" She looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. "They want to negotiate through you." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Tucker felt the weight of understanding settle on his shoulders. "They know about our connection. Colonel Morrison remembers the little girl you saved. He remembers your ... advocacy ... on her behalf. He thinks you might be able to convince me to accept the terms peacefully." Her smile was sad now, not sharp. "He doesn't understand that the frightened child who trusted you is gone, is she?" Tucker asked quietly. The question seemed to catch Ayanna off guard. For just a moment, her carefully maintained composure flickered. "I came here to tell you that I will not surrender. My people will not be penned up like cattle. We will fight until we can fight no more." "That's not an answer to my question." They sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, Tucker could hear the distant sound of more horses approaching. Ayanna heard it too. Her head tilted slightly, listening. "My war party," she explained. "They wait for my signal." "How many?" "Enough." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the valley. "This is where it happened, isn't it? Where you found me. About 2 miles north of here. There's nothing left now. The grass has grown over everything. I remember the smell of smoke. I remember your hands pulling me from the fire. I remember thinking that you were the bravest man in the world." Her voice was soft now, almost childlike. "For years, I dreamed about you, wondered what happened to the soldier who saved my life." Tucker felt tears stinging his eyes. "And now you know. I became an old man who grows vegetables and talks to himself." "No." She turned to face him. "You became the man who gave a frightened child the chance to become a warrior queen." The choice. The sound of approaching horses was getting closer now. Tucker could see them through the window, a line of Cheyenne warriors emerging from the morning mist, like ghosts made flesh. They were magnificent and terrible, their painted faces fierce beneath eagle feathers and war bonnets. "They're waiting for your answer," Tucker said, double quotes, "yes. Will you carry the army's message of surrender to me? Will you try to convince me to lead my people onto the reservation?" Tucker looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had once been a frightened child, this war chief who had once clung to his uniform and begged him not to let them take her. She was asking him to choose between his duty to peace and his loyalty to the girl he had saved. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to remember that little girl you pulled from the fire. I want you to remember what you saw in her eyes that night. And then I want you to decide if I deserve to choose my own fate." Tucker closed his eyes and thought about that night 15 years ago. He remembered the way she had looked at him with such trust, such hope. He remembered fighting the military bureaucracy to try to keep her safe. He remembered the pain in his chest when they took her away. When he opened his eyes, Ayanna was watching him intently. "The army's terms are generous," he said carefully. "Good land on the reservation, protection, schools for the children, and the price. Freedom." She nodded as if this confirmed something she had already known. "And what is Marshal Tucker Dawson's recommendation?" Tucker was quiet for a long time. Outside, he could see the war party waiting with the patience of men who had learned to live with uncertainty. Their horses stamped and snorted in the cool morning air, breath steaming like small clouds.